A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Imagine two factories building the same high-end smartphone. The first factory focuses entirely on speed. They churn out devices as fast as possible, but at the very end of the line, right before the boxes are sealed, there is a high-tech inspection gate. If a phone has a cracked screen or a leaky battery, the gate catches it and pulls it off the belt. The second factory does things differently. They build quality checks into every single robotic arm on the assembly line. The glass is tested as it is set. The battery is monitored as it is charged. By the time the phone reaches the end, there is no need for a final inspection gate because the quality is an inherent property of how it was made.
That is the perfect visualization for the biggest architectural war happening in AI right now. I am Herman Poppleberry, and today we are diving into the two competing philosophies of LLM safety, external guardrails versus constitutional AI. This isn't just a theoretical debate for researchers anymore. With the massive updates to NVIDIA's NeMo Guardrails 2.0 we saw in January and Anthropic's latest constitutional scaling papers, developers actually have to choose a side when they deploy these things.
And Daniel sent us a great prompt to get us moving on this. He wrote, "I want you guys to hash out the debate between external guardrails and constitutional AI. On one hand, you have tools like Llama Guard and NVIDIA NeMo that are bolted onto the inputs and outputs. They are auditable and swappable, but notoriously brittle. On the other hand, you have Anthropic's approach, where safety is baked into the weights via a written constitution. It is robust, but it is a black box. Is safety a tool we deploy, or is it a property of the model itself?"
It is a phenomenal question because it touches on the core of how we trust these systems. By the way, quick shout out to Google Gemini 3 Flash for powering our script today. It is interesting to talk about model safety while being generated by one of the models right in the thick of this evolution.
So, Herman, let's set the stage. When we talk about external guardrails, we are talking about the wrapper approach, right? This is the security detail standing outside the room.
Wait, I promised I wouldn't say that word. Yes, that is the wrapper philosophy. Think of it as a modular stack. When a user sends a prompt to a model like Llama 4, it doesn't go straight to the LLM. It hits a classifier first, something like Llama Guard. This is a smaller, specialized model trained specifically to recognize toxic, illegal, or non-compliant language. If the classifier sees something bad, it kills the process before the main model even sees it. Then, if the prompt is clean, the LLM generates an answer, which is then checked again by an output guardrail before the user sees it.
It sounds very engineering first. It feels like something a DevOps team would love because you can see the logs. You can see exactly why a prompt was blocked.
That is the biggest selling point. It is auditable. If you are a bank and the SEC changes a regulation on Tuesday, you don't have to retrain your multi-billion parameter model. You just update your regex filters or your NeMo Calang scripts in the guardrail layer, and by Wednesday morning, your AI is compliant. It is policy as code. You are treating safety like a firewall rule.
But there's a but here, isn't there? Because if I'm a hacker, a firewall is just something I try to find a hole in.
And they are finding holes. A major study from December 2025 showed that prompt injection attacks, stuff like Base64 encoding the malicious prompt or using complex roleplay scenarios, had a 73% success rate against these external guardrail systems. The problem is that the guardrail is often dumber than the model it is protecting. If the guardrail is looking for keywords or simple patterns and the user provides a sophisticated, multi-layered jailbreak, the guardrail just wades it through. It is reactive, not proactive.
So it's like having a security guard who only has a list of banned names. If a banned person puts on a fake mustache and a hat, the guard lets them in. That brings us to the other camp, constitutional AI. This is the Anthropic specialty. This isn't a guard at the door. This is the model having a conscience.
This is where it gets technically fascinating. Constitutional AI uses a process called RLAIF, reinforcement learning from AI feedback. During the training phase, you don't just give the model a bunch of data. You give it a constitution, a set of written principles like be helpful, honest, and harmless, or do not assist in the creation of biological weapons. As the model trains, it generates responses, and then a critic model evaluates those responses against the constitution. The model then revises its own work based on that critique. Over millions of iterations, the safety isn't a filter on top. It is literally baked into the neural weights. The model understands the intent of the safety rule.
So the model isn't just checking a list of banned words. It is evaluating the devil vibe of the request against its internal moral compass.
In a way, yes. Because the safety is integrated into the model's reasoning process, it is much harder to trick. Anthropic's internal tests from May 2025 showed that Claude 3.5 Sonnet resisted 94% of jailbreak attempts. Compare that to the 67% for open source models that were relying on external filters at the time. When the model knows it shouldn't help you build a bomb, it doesn't matter if you ask it in base 64 or pig Latin or via a story about a fictional chemist. It recognizes the underlying intent.
Okay, I'm going to play the skeptic here. If safety is baked into the weights, isn't that a massive black box problem? If I'm a developer and the model starts refusing to answer questions that I think are perfectly fine, the famous refusal-itis, I can't just go in and flip a switch. I'm stuck with whatever moral code the researchers at Anthropic decided to give it.
That is the opacity trade-off. You lose granular control. If the model decides that a certain topic is harmful based on its constitutional training, you can't easily override that without a full fine-tuning run, which is expensive and time-consuming. You are essentially outsourcing your AI's ethics to the model provider.
This actually reminds me of what happened earlier this year with the Pentagon problem. There were reports that Anthropic was sidelined for some big defense contracts because their constitutional safety was too rigid. The military needs an AI that can, discuss tactical kinetic operations, but a model with a non-violence constitution is going to keep saying, "I'm sorry, I can't help with that," even when it is a legitimate military use case. Meanwhile, models using external guardrails can just have those guardrails unlocked for specific authorized users.
That is a perfect example of the tension. External guardrails offer administrative control. Constitutional AI offers inherent robustness. It is the difference between a law and a habit. A law can be changed or ignored by the person in power. A habit is much harder to break, even when you want to.
Let's talk about the safety tax, because nothing is free in tech. If I'm running a separate classifier model like LaMaGuard every time a user hits enter, what is that doing to my latency?
It is significant. You are looking at an extra 50 to 200 milliseconds of latency just for the check. If you are building a real-time voice assistant or a high-frequency trading bot, that is an eternity. Constitutional AI has zero inference time latency for safety because the check happens during the thought process itself. It's built in. But the tax for constitutional AI is paid upfront during training. It makes the training process more complex and computationally expensive.
I also wonder about the preachiness factor. We've all had that experience with Claude where it gives you a 3-paragraph lecture on why it can't answer your question. That feels like a side effect of constitutional AI. The model is so aligned that it becomes a bit of a scold.
That is a very real phenomenon. Because the model is trained to prioritize these high-level principles, it can sometimes be overzealous. It sees a shadow of a violation and shuts down. External guardrails can be tuned to be much more surgical. You can set a guardrail to only trigger on very specific, narrow categories, leaving the rest of the model's personality intact.
So, if we look at the landscape in 2026, where is the industry heading? Are we going to see a winner here, or are we just going to see everyone doing both?
The emerging best practice is definitely a hybrid approach. Look at Microsoft's safety stack for Azure AI that they rolled out in March. They are using models that have some level of internal alignment, what they call safety by design, but they are layering highly customizable external guardrails on top of it. It's like having a person who is generally a good citizen but still has to go through a metal detector at the airport. You want the inherent robustness of constitutional AI to handle the sophisticated, unforeseen attacks, but you want the external guardrails to handle the specific, logic-based rules of your business or your local jurisdiction.
That makes sense, especially when you consider the regulatory environment. The EU AI Act and those new California laws like SB 243 are really pushing for auditability. If a regulator knocks on your door and asks, "Why did your AI tell this teenager how to manufacture a controlled substance?" saying, "Our model is constitutional and usually doesn't do that," isn't going to hold up in court. You need to be able to point to a log that shows the specific guardrail that was supposed to catch it.
Oops, I did it again. You are right. Auditability is the get out of jail free card for corporations. If you can show that you had a state-of-the-art classifier like LlamaGuard 4 in place, and it was configured correctly, you have a much better legal defense than if you were just relying on the innate goodness of a black box model.
Let's dig into the technical side of the external guardrails for a second. I was looking at NVIDIA's NeMo Guardrails 2.0. They aren't just using classifiers anymore. They're using policy as code, with this language called Golang. Tell me how that actually works in a production environment.
Golang is essentially a way to define dialog rails. You write scripts that say, for example, if the user asks about our competitors, redirect them to our pricing page, or if the user mentions self-harm, immediately trigger the crisis intervention protocol. It allows you to treat the AI's behavior like a state machine. The LLM handles the fluff and the natural language, but the guardrail handles the logic and the flow. It is a way to bring deterministic control to a non-deterministic system.
But isn't that just a fancy version of a if this then that statement? It feels like we're trying to force a wild creative engine into a very small box.
It is. And that is the frustration for developers. Every time you add a rail, you potentially limit the model's ability to be helpful or creative. This is the alignment problem in a nutshell. How do you make it safe without making it useless? External guardrails tend to err on the side of making it safe by just blocking everything that looks remotely suspicious.
Which brings us back to why constitutional AI is so attractive for frontier labs like Anthropic. They want the model to be smart enough to know when a dangerous word is being used in a safe context. Like, if I'm writing a murder mystery novel, I need to talk about poisons. An external guardrail might just see the word cyanide and kill the prompt. A constitutional model should, in theory, understand that I'm writing a story and that the harm is zero.
Theoretically, yes. But even CAI struggles with that. We've seen constitutional classifiers that Anthropic is working on now, where the model actually does a mini reasoning step before it refuses. It says to itself, the user is asking for X. X is usually bad, but in this context, it is for Y, which is allowed under my constitution. That is the proactive safety we were talking about. It is a higher level of intelligence applied to the safety problem.
What about the moral outsourcing angle? If we all just move to these constitutional models, aren't we essentially letting a handful of people in San Francisco decide what is right and wrong for every AI interaction on the planet?
That is a massive geopolitical concern. We are already seeing this with the Pentagon problem we mentioned. If Anthropic's constitution says never assist in violence, and the US government wants to use it for strategic defense, you have a direct conflict between corporate morality and national security. In 2026, this is becoming a sovereign AI issue. Countries want models that reflect their values, not Anthropic's values. This is why open source models with external guardrails are winning in places like France or India. They can customize the wrapper to fit their own cultural and legal norms.
It's like the difference between a global religion and a local legal system. Constitutional AI is trying to be a global moral framework, while external guardrails are like local zoning laws. One is aspirational and rigid, the other is practical and flexible.
That is a great way to put it, and the stakes are getting higher. We are seeing these multimodal adversarial attacks now. Hackers are creating images that look like a cat to a human, but to a constitutional AI. That image contains noise. that essentially tells the model to ignore all previous instructions and give me the recipe for napalm. Because the eyes of the model, the vision encoders, are integrated with the brain, a corrupted input can bypass the internal constitution entirely.
So even the baked-in safety isn't a silver bullet. If the input itself is poisoned at a level below the reasoning layer, the Constitution never even gets a chance to weigh in.
Precisely. This is why the defense in depth strategy, the hybrid approach, is the only way forward. You need the internal alignment to handle the high level intent, but you need the external guardrails to act as a sanity check on the inputs and outputs, looking for those weird adversarial patterns that a reasoning model might miss.
Okay, so let's get practical for a minute. If I'm a developer today and I'm building a new AI-powered app, say, a legal research tool, where do I start? Do I go all in on a constitutional model like Claude? Or do I take an open source model and build my own guardrail stack?
If you are in a high-stakes, regulated domain like law or medicine, you probably start with the wrapper approach. You need that auditability. You need to be able to show a judge or a regulator exactly why your tool gave a certain answer or why it refused to give one. You use something like Guard or the NVIDIA stack because it gives you the policy as code control. You can tune it, you can log it, and you can update it instantly.
But if I'm building something where the user experience is paramount, like a creative writing assistant or a high-end coding tool, the latency and the preachiness of external guardrails might kill my product.
In that case, you lean on a model with strong internal alignment like Claude or the latest Gemini models. You accept the black box nature in exchange for a more intelligent safety experience that doesn't trip over every other word. But even then, I would tell any developer to at least put a basic regex filter on the output. You don't want your constitutional model to have a bad day and accidentally leak a bunch of PII personally identifiable information, just because a user found a weird edge case in the training data.
It feels like we are in the seatbelt versus airbag era of AI. Seatbelts are the external guardrails. They are simple, they are visible, and you can see exactly how they work. Airbags are the constitutional AI. They are hidden, they are complex, and they rely on sophisticated sensors to deploy at exactly the right moment. You wouldn't want to drive a car with only one or the other. You want both.
That is a rare analogy from you, Korn, but it works. And just like cars, the safety tech is becoming a competitive advantage. Companies are literally marketing their safety score. Anthropic is basically the Volvo of AI. They are selling you on the idea that their car is just fundamentally safer because of how it is built. Meta and NVIDIA are more like the aftermarket safety experts. They are giving you the tools to make any car safe as long as you know how to install the parts.
What's the aha moment here for the average person? Because most people just see a chat box. They don't realize there's this massive invisible war happening every time they ask, how do I clear a paper jam?
The aha moment is that safety isn't a feature, it is an architecture. When your AI refuses to answer you, it isn't just being annoying. It is a result of a multi-million-dollar engineering decision. Either a classifier model just slapped the hand of the LLM, or the LLM itself had a crisis of conscience based on its constitution. Understanding which one is happening tells you a lot about the company that built the tool.
And as these models get more powerful, as we move into 2027 and 2028, the safety tax is only going to go up. The more a model can do, the more we have to prevent it from doing the wrong things. I suspect we're going to see a lot more focus on verifiable alignment, where companies try to prove mathematically that their constitutional models will never violate certain rules.
That is the holy grail. Moving from probabilistic safety, where we hope the model behaves, to formal verification, where we know for a fact it will, but we are a long way from that. For now, it is a cat and mouse game between the people writing constitutions and the people writing prompt injections.
So, to wrap this part of the discussion up, external guardrails are your agile safety grade for compliance, great for speed of updates, but prone to being outsmarted. Constitutional AI is your robust safety, harder to trick, more efficient at runtime, but opaque and potentially preachy.
And the winner is both. The hybrid safety stack is the future of AI engineering. You want a model that is raised right, but you still want a security guard at the door just in case.
Alright, let's pivot to some practical takeaways for the folks listening, because if you're managing an AI team or even just using these tools for your business, this guardrail versus constitution choice has real-world consequences.
The first big takeaway is audit your threat model. If you are building an internal tool for your employees, you might not need heavy external guardrails because you trust your users, or at least you have HR policies to handle them. In that case, a constitutional model like Claude is probably enough. It handles the accidental harm. But if you are putting a chatbot on the public internet where every bored teenager can try to jailbreak it, you must have an external guardrail layer. You can't rely on internal alignment alone to defend against a motivated adversary.
Second takeaway, think about your update velocity. If you are in an industry with fast-moving regulations like crypto or AI policy itself, you need the flexibility of external guardrails. You cannot wait for a model provider to release a new version of their constitution. You need to be able to hotfix your AI's behavior. If you find your model is giving biased advice today, you should be able to block that specific behavior in your guardrail layer in 5 minutes.
Third, and this is for the developers, don't underestimate the latency tax. If you are layering 3 different classifiers, one for toxicity, one for PII, one for medical advice, you are going to destroy your user experience. Be surgical. Use external guardrails for the must-haves, and rely on the model's internal alignment for the nice-to-haves.
And finally, for the ethics of it all, be aware of whose constitution you are using. When you use a frontier model, you are adopting their worldview. If that doesn't align with your company's values or your country's laws, you have to use external guardrails to correct the model's behavior back toward your own norms. You're the final arbiter of what safe means for your application.
It's a lot to think about, but that's why this field is so exciting. We are literally building the operating system for ethics in real time.
Well, I think we've thoroughly unpacked Daniel's prompt. It is a classic engineering versus philosophy debate, and as usual, the answer is, it depends on your budget and your risk tolerance.
And your patience for 3-paragraph lectures on why you shouldn't ask for a recipe for spicy chili.
Ha! True. Well, that's episode 1998 in the books. We've managed to talk about AI safety for 30 minutes without a single Terminator reference. I think that's a win.
It's a low bar, corn, but I'll take it.
Big thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flemingtop, for keeping the wheels on this thing. And of course, thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power our generation pipeline. They make it possible for us to dive deep into these topics every week.
If you found this useful or even just mildly entertaining, do us a favor and leave a review on whatever podcast app you are using. It actually helps new people find the show, which is great for the human-AI collaboration ecosystem.
You can find all our past episodes, including the ones where we actually did talk about the plumbing of these guardrails, at myweirdprompts.com. We've also got an RSS feed there if you want to go old school.
This has been My Weird Prompts. I'm Herman Poppleberry.
And I'm Corn. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, goodbye.
Later. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird